Hello team, this is a bonus to the challenges that we've been experiencing this week, the Schema Validator challenges. I said in yesterday's challenge that I wasn't really happy with the solution about how it built up over time. And in this video, I want to explain how I would correct that now that I know more of what's coming down the line. So with that, I'm going to jump over to code, and it is completely empty. We're starting from scratch, which means that technically we should probably grab this. I should have done that. Let's go back and create our schema. Okay, brand new. We're going to do it from scratch. And we are starting right here with that default schema. Okay, this is going to be the object, which is great. And down in here, we're going to do that exact same thing. So we're going to use schema just like this, set it equal to default schema, and start changing some things. Specifically, in username, okay? Well, specifically the object first, okay? We're going to create a class called Validator, okay? And on that class, there's going to be a bunch of static methods like object, okay? So we're passing in an object to this method, right? The object is inside of the brackets like this. And that object is going to also have schema information. So we're going to use validator right here as well, where it's going to be validator.string, and that's going to be a method. And then later on, we will add and add and add. Okay. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to return both the validator object, right, with information. Also, there's going to be a parse function on there, a parse method. And what that means is that down here, because we're using it as schema, right, we can grab this and go schema.parse. And what are we parsing? Well, it is the object, right? That's the whole thing. What we haven't done is we haven't created validator, okay? So from here, we shouldn't really need to ever change this function, right? We should just be able to pass in the schema and then parse it or parse the object against that schema and return true or false. That's the hope. That's the ambition, okay? So up here, I'm going to set up that class. It's going to be that validator, which is not here. That's like this. And we want to do a couple things. So we're going to build it from the outside in. We're going to start with that object, okay? So it's going to be static, right? That way we don't have to instantiate validator. We can just use it directly. And of course, object, which scares me because I'm pretty sure object is a safe word, a controlled word. So there is a small chance that this might bite me in the butt later on, but we'll keep going with this, okay? Object is going to get not object, but schema, right? Because we're passing in this bit, which is the actual schema object for our schema variable, okay? A little confusing. Hopefully that makes sense. But down here, we return another object, which feels kind of weird, but stay with me. It's going to have a type in there. We're going to type it as object, just like this. And then we're going to send in some values. Those values are going to be the schema, just like this. And that parse function, right? That parse function we haven't made, but it's going to be a private function. So we can only ever call it from here, basically, right? This object is inside of this class declaration. So we can call this private function called parse from inside of here, but we aren't actually calling it. We're just referencing it. So no parentheses. Okay, we're leaving those off. Okay, that parse function will be down here, where we go static again, static, just like this, and we send in parse. And what are we parsing? Well, it is this time it's the object, right? We're getting that object. So we should do pretty much the same thing that we did before, right? If we set it up, which means that we want to test if this if the schema is right, or sorry, if the type of this object is correct. Okay, so we're going to set this dot type not equal to object, right? Could we have just done type of? Yeah, absolutely. But by generating the schema, we make it easier to grab onto this information. We make it faster, okay? So this dot type, which is the thing being passed in, the object. And if that, sorry, the schema, right? The schema, this keyword is going to trip me up there. But this references the schema that has the parse inside of it. So that is an object. And if that is not true, then return false. Before we threw an error, here I'm going to return false in case I want to start my validator, my schema. It's maybe an array, right? So I need to leave that door open for now. But for now, that does it. And then down here, we return the same kind of thing. We return object.keys, passing in this dot values, right? So this is the thing, right? Which is being added to default schema here. So this dot values is what we're looking for there, and dot every, okay? So just like before, we're going to send in key and do a thing, setting up this callback. What are we doing? Well, we're checking if key is in the object being passed in, and similar to before, but a little bit different, this dot values key dot type, right? Because now we're using type instead of type of. So if that type is equal to type of object, object key, sorry, getting ahead of myself. Why isn't that lighting up? Type of, there it is. So if the type that we set up in our schema, and we aren't quite done there because we need the string, right? So if the type in there is equal to the type of the current object, then we're good, right? That should be what we need. Now, the last part is that string, so let's go do that really fast. That is another static, and we return string, which is technically another control word, but it seems to work for now, so we're going to let it ride, okay? And what are we doing? Well, for now, we're returning type of string, okay? And that does it, okay? That's how we get started. So we've set up our validator object, and this looks very much like Zod, because that's kind of what I've modeled it on, but Zod is way better, right? We just can't import the library, so we're kind of hacking it together today, okay? But we have that object, we have that string, and we use this parse to get it done, okay? With that, we can go on to the next one, which is right here. So we had part 2 where we added more stuff, okay? So if I paste that in, right, and I add in those 2 strings, we have post and verified. So that goes right here, right? We paste it in. We take this validator, we use some multi-cursors on the colons, right? And we go validator dot, whatever that is, and execute it, okay? I'm going to add an extra comment here because I like it that way, but we just need to make number and Boolean, right? So now we're into making new methods, and those methods can be tested. If I send through validator string, I should expect to get this object. If I send through validator number, just like this, right? Sending this, and this can be number. So I expect an object with that. Or in the case of Boolean, same sort of thing where I go Boolean, right? And because I've added those, again, it works, right? And these are all testable by themselves to make sure that what we're sending in and what we're getting back are exactly what we need, right? So this is challenge 2, right? We just had to add those 2 things. We didn't need to update any of the parsing logic. Again, we never need to touch isValid schema again, right? Because of how we're doing this. And we're just adding to the schema, right? We're calling different things and doing stuff, which is awesome, okay? With that, we go to part 3, where we had this conditional, right? And so let's go and do that. Let's go and paste this in, and then we will go and grab this line, copying it, bringing it in, putting it right above our default schema. So const roles equals this. But again, we can't use these pipes, right? The bitwise or doesn't work for us. We're going to multi-cursor that. We're going to turn it into an array. And then we're going to add those squares, okay? From here, we're going to use string again. And that's the power of this. Because these are all strings, we're just going to use that again. So we can bring this one down and rename it to role, and this is going to be validator string. And what do? Well, we pass in an argument this time. Whereas before we didn't have an argument. Now we add roles, okay? Which means that what are we doing? Well, we're editing a single method, this one here, right? We're going to send through the values like this. And then instead of returning directly, we're going to set up a variable, okay? And that way we can add to the variable. So right here we have output. We are going to return output. And inside of here, if values, if there are values, then we want to do something. And the question becomes what, right? Like for this, I feel like we could send through an array of strings or just a single string where it has to equal that exactly. Feels kind of weird that way, but we'll go with it, okay? So for that, I'm going to go back up here. We're going to go output.test, right? So if we're inside of this conditional, we're adding the test property. Technically, it'll be a method, but output.test equals, and we test, okay? So we go array.isArray like this, sending in values. Did I actually use values? Checking my names really fast. Oh, you know what? I called it value. So there's, just to keep it consistent, value. If you already have it as values, it doesn't really matter. It'll just help me keep it straight later on, okay? So if value is an array, then we do stuff. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to send through a method, right? That method is going to be whatever our value is, right? So that's going to be down in here, sorry, it's going to be object key, the value from object key. And we are going to pass that in and run a test. What is a test? Well, it is value dot includes val. Come on, val, just like this. Brilliant. And if it is not an array, then let's assume that it's a string, okay? Which is probably a bad assumption, but for now it kind of works. So we're going to go value equals, triple equals val, right? Again, this is kind of what we're going for, where if we don't have a value, we skip this block. Whoops. We skip this block and we just return output, which is what we had before. But now if we do pass in a value, then we do something with it. We see if it's an array. If it is, then we send back a method that tests if our object value is included. Otherwise, we just test for basic equality, right? With that, we need to update this part down here because we don't really have a way to do that, okay? And so what we do, scrolling up, making sure my notes are in the right place, is we add our test, okay? So if this dot values, right? Because we use that values, and then of course we get key, so whatever that key is, and if there is a test, right? That's the whole thing. We see if we have a test property, okay? Then we run it. So return this whole thing, okay? Copying it, pasting it in, doing the thing, and passing in what? Well, it's object key, right? At which point, again, it works. And so we're very quickly building out this class with a bunch of static methods that can get the job done, right? And that's key. We were able to update our string with all of our original tests. If we had written a test to make sure that just using validator.string returns this basic object, well, now we can add a new test that is validator.string with a value should return one of these as well, right? It should create a better object. And we can keep building into that. Right now, I just test for isArray and assume that it's either an array or just a string, right? We probably need more, but for today, it works, okay? Which leads to our final bit for this video, okay? which is Schema Validator Part 4, where we had the optional flag, okay? So again, we go and paste in our original code, and then we go and get supporter. It's a Boolean. Actually, let's just go down to my schema right here and copy Boolean, updating for supporter like this. And great. You would think that that would be pretty good. Again, it should get us most everything except for number 2 again, right? There's something about that that just doesn't want to work. And it's probably because it's not yet optional, right? Now, the way that Zod does it is you can actually tack on to the end. They have it so that you can chain these. So you could write dot optional. If I was to do that now, I would have to do a bit of a heavy rewrite to my class, right? Where I would have to manage some kind of state inside of here, right? So I'd have to have a property, and then instead of let output, it would be this dot output or something like that. I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to cheat on this one. And what I mean by that is I'm going to wrap this right here inside of validator.optional, right? Because we can do it however we want. So if you wanted to study up how to do chaining through static methods, absolutely take that route. I'm trying to keep it simple so that I can go fast, right? So this one gets the job done. No problem, okay? Which means that up here, right above my parse, I'm going to send in static optional, okay? Optional, just like this. And what are we doing? Well, it's going to be that object again, which is actually a schema. We could call it schema, right? And what are we doing? Well, we are returning that schema with an optional flag, okay? So we go schema.optional equals true, and then return schema, right? So whatever that is, we just do it. Now we have that optional flag, which means that if you remember from yesterday's challenge, we need to update this, okay? So right now we have, this is our key condition in here, key in object, which means that we change this to be something like this, where it is a question mark. And then right here we go with this dot values key dot optional. If I remember, checking my notes. Where is it hiding? It is down here. Yes. In fact, there's one other little thing, right? What if we don't have optional, right? And so we're trying to find something. Maybe we need that that question mark in front of there. So it's it'll return early if it doesn't have an optional property, and it'll return a falsy value, undefined, right? So at this point, it works. And this brings us to the end of this rapid fire build out and refactor of this challenge, right? What we did was we rethought how this data actually works, right? It would be nice if we could match with the pipes and with the strings that aren't in quotes and stuff like that. Because of how TypeScript works with abstract syntax trees, they can get away with that. They do it beforehand, and then they move it away before the JavaScript actually runs. Great. We cannot do that here, right? So we need to do something else. And the style that Zod has created works brilliantly for that. So we're able to create something that is very, I hesitate to say very Zod-like, actually, because they actually do their code completely different. I'm just cobbling stuff together to beat the challenge, but they are constantly updating and iterating on their code, right? That's a project that is in active development. So if you get the chance to use that, instead of building out your whole a whole schema by yourself, you should probably do that, right? But for now, here's where we leave it, where we have this validator and we're going through and we can set some optional flags on basically any of these, right? And then again, like for this test here, this return, should that be inside of this conditional where I'm firing the test method as well? It probably should, right? And we get away with it because all of the FreeCodeCamp tests on these challenges are kind of happy path. They're planned out and they aren't designed to break. So in real life, we would need to test those edge cases to make sure. Today, we're getting a little bit lucky, and I'm going to leave it where it is. Again, this has been a rapid fire bonus through 4 challenges, right? Through the past 4 days to rewrite this in a way that I think is a little bit stronger. It is longer code, right? Because again, we have all these different static methods in here that we need to take care of and manage, but ultimately it is going to be easier to maintain. And you saw that when I updated string to include some test values, right? Or when I updated and made this optional flag, right? I don't need to parse out other things like question marks and stuff like that. I can just use it, which is awesome. So again, this has been the bonus. Let me know what you think about it. You will see this again later on in the next challenge, right? Which is Schema Validator Part 5. I've already seen that, so very happy that we're staying with it so that I can show you a little bit more. Until then, this is it. Again, let me know in the comments what you think, and I will see you in that video.